Thank you to everyone who watches my work. If you'd like to support the channel, subscribe, like the video, and leave a comment. Your opinion truly matters to me.
I don't know why I'm writing this. Guess I just need to get it out. To lay the whole story out from start to finish somewhere, because I lied in the official reports. I lied to my friends, and I'm even lying to my shrink. Because the truth sounds like the ravings of a lunatic. But it's eating me alive, and I have to tell someone, even if it's just strangers on the internet. Maybe one of you has run into something similar. Or maybe you'll just tell me I'm crazy. Sometimes I think that would be the better option. My name's David. Well, not my real name, but it'll do. I'm 42, and until recently, I spent almost 15 years as a K-9 handler for a sheriff's office in one of the counties bordering Olympic National Park in Washington State. If you've never been there, let me paint a picture. It's not just a forest. It's another world. The trees out there are giants, covered in moss like old men's beards. The ground springs under your feet from centuries of packed-down pine needles and decaying leaves. It gets so quiet you can hear the blood pumping in your ears. And it's huge, endless, wild, and it doesn't give a damn about you. We're just guests there, and the forest isn't always happy to have company. My partner for all those years was Rex, a German shepherd, a purebred working line male. And when I say partner, I'm not exaggerating. That dog was an extension of me. He knew my commands from the slightest shift in my tone, from the flick of a hand. I knew him by the twitch of his ear, by the way he planted a paw. Together we found lost kids, pulled seniors with dementia out of ravines, and tracked down escaped convicts. His nose was worth more than all our GPS trackers and thermal imagers combined. Rex was a machine, focused, fearless, absolutely solid. Never once in our entire career did he let me down. Until that day, it started with a standard call. A missing hiker. David Bailey, 34, some tech guy from Seattle. Judging by his social media, he was an experienced solo hiker. Not one of those weekend warriors who hits the trail in flip-flops. He had good gear, and he'd left his route with his wife. He was supposed to have hiked out to a pickup point 3 days ago. When he didn't show and stopped responding, his wife called it in. We found his car, a gray Subaru, in the lot at the Hoh River trailhead. Nothing out of the ordinary. We was me, Rex, and 2 park rangers, a couple of guys named Adam and Chris. Standard procedure. I took Bailey's hiking jacket from his car, let Rex get the scent. He dropped low, pulled the air in through that incredible nose of his, then raised his head and looked at me. It's a look I know better than my own reflection. It meant, got the scent. Let's go to work. We moved out along the trail. The weather was typical for Washington in October, damp, cool, with a gray sheet pulled over the sky. The forest was silent and wet. For the first couple of miles, Rex was a locomotive, tail high, nose to the ground. He led us exactly along the route Bailey had left for his wife. We found little signs, an energy bar wrapper, a boot print in the mud. Everything was going by the book. The weirdness started around mile 5. The trail gets less defined out here, heading deeper into the real wilderness. And Rex stopped. Just froze dead in the middle of the trail. I waited. Sometimes he needs a moment to reacquire the scent if the wind shifts or an animal crosses the path. But he wasn't searching. He was standing there, head and tail down, trembling. "What is it, buddy?" I asked, rubbing the scruff of his neck. The fur on his back was standing on end. I mean, literally bristling. I'd never seen that on him unless he was facing down a grizzly bear in training. But there wasn't a sound. No scent in the air that would alarm him. I let him sniff the jacket again. He turned away from it. Turned away. Rex, who lived for this job, who whined with anticipation before every call-out, just turned his head away from the scent. Instead of moving forward, he backed up and pressed against my leg. He started whimpering, a high, pathetic sound, like a puppy. Adam walked up to me. "Trouble?" "I don't know," I said, still not believing what I was seeing. He's never done this before. Maybe he smells a predator? Cougar? Bear? He'd be barking, not whining? Chris pointed out. He was right. Rex was trained to meet a threat with aggression, not fear. This was something else. This was primal, animal terror. I looked into his eyes and saw something I'd never seen before, a plea. He was begging me to turn back. But I've got a job to do. A man was missing, and it was my duty to find him. I clipped the lead to his collar. "Rex, forward. Find." He dug in all four paws. I practically had to drag him. Every step was a struggle for him. He kept looking back, whimpering, his body coiled tight as a spring. It was like trying to pull a dog into a vet's office, only 1,000 times worse. We went on like that for about an hour. The forest around us grew thicker, darker. It felt like the trees were closing in overhead, choking out what little light there was. The silence became oppressive. Usually there's always some rustle, some chirp, some snap of a twig in the woods. But here there was total dead silence. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath in the branches. And then we smelled it. Not the smell of a wild animal, not the smell of decomposition. It was a strange, sharp smell like ozone after a thunderstorm, wet dog, and something else. Something metallic, like blood. Rex whimpered louder and tried to bolt, yanking me back toward the trail. I had to grip the lead hard. A couple 100 yards later, we broke into a small clearing, and there was Bailey's camp. We knew something was wrong immediately. The tent, an expensive four-season model, was in the middle of the clearing, but it was torn, and not torn like a bear would do it. A bear tears from the side, trying to get at food inside. This tent was slashed open from the top. 3 long, parallel slashes ran right across the roof. Whatever did it would have to be 8 or 9 feet tall to reach that. And immensely strong. The cuts were clean, like they'd been made by 3 giant blades. Bailey's pack lay next to it, open. The contents were scattered, but not randomly. It was like someone had carefully sorted through them, looking for something specific. His sleeping bag was pulled out, but lay untouched. A cookpot with the remains of last night's dinner sat on a cold camp stove. No sign of a struggle, no blood. Adam and Chris started checking the perimeter while I approached the tent. The smell was stronger here. I shone my flashlight inside. Nothing. Empty. Bailey wasn't here. "David, over here!" Chris called out quietly. He was standing at the edge of the trees, looking at the trunk of a massive Douglas fir. At about my eye level, there were deep gouges in the bark. 3 parallel marks again. Too high for a coyote or wolf, too thin and deep for a bear. "What the hell could have done that?" Adam muttered. Just then, Rex, who had been glued to my legs this whole time, let out a growl. A low guttural sound. It wasn't his normal service growl. This was the sound of a cornered animal. He wasn't looking at the tent or the scratches. He was staring deep into the woods, into the shadows between the trees. I followed his gaze. And I saw it. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light. A figure was standing about 50 yards away, partly hidden by a tree trunk. It was dark, tall, and thin. I squinted. A person? Another hiker?
"Sheriff's office,"
I yelled, my hand instinctively going to my sidearm.
"Step out where I can see you."
The figure didn't move. It just stood there. I switched on my headlamp and aimed the beam at it. And that's when I realized it wasn't human. It was covered in dark, coarse fur, like a wolf or a large dog. But it was standing on two legs. Not hunched over like a bear, but upright. It was leaning casually against a tree, one shoulder propped up like some guy waiting for a bus. Long, disproportionate arms hung at its sides. Its head was elongated, with a long snout like a wolf, but its eyes glowed in my headlamp beam, not yellow or green like an animal's, but a dull red, like two embers. And the most bizarre thing, the thing that made my brain just short-circuit for a second. In one of its hands, held between long black claws, was something thin and white. A little wisp of smoke was rising from it. It was smoking, or at least it was mimicking the act. It brought the object to its snout, and the red tip glowed brighter. Adam and Chris were frozen next to me. I could hear Adam's teeth chattering. Is that a costume?" he whispered. But it wasn't a costume. The movements were too fluid, too natural. The way it shifted its weight from one leg to the other, the way it tilted its head slightly, studying us. It was alive. My mind raced through the possibilities. A rabid bear? No. A guy in a suit? Why? Way out here. A hallucination? All three of us were seeing it, and Rex was feeling it. I don't know what came over me. Years of training, I guess. Threat neutralize. I unclipped Rex's lead.
Get him,
I commanded. And Rex did something I never ever would have expected. He let out a yelp, tucked his tail between his legs, and tried to hide behind me. My fearless partner, who would charge armed men without a second thought, was paralyzed with terror. The creature in the woods noticed. It pushed off the tree and took a step forward, into the open. It was enormous, at least 8 feet tall, and then it did something that will be burned into my nightmares forever. It smoothly, effortlessly dropped to all fours. Its joints bent at unnatural angles, but the motion looked completely organic. Now it looked like a gigantic, nightmarish wolf. It lowered its head and made a sound. I can't describe that sound. My body cam, which had been on the whole time, recorded nothing at this point but deafening static, white noise, and crackling, like the microphone just fried. But what I heard with my own ears, it wasn't just a sound wave. It was a vibration that passed through me, through the ground, through the trees. It resonated deep in my chest, made my bones hum. It was the sound of absolute, unquestionable authority. A sound that said, "This is my territory. You are nothing here." And Rex, my poor, brave Rex, he understood. He stopped growling. He took a few steps forward on trembling legs, out into the middle of the clearing, and he lay down, just rolled onto his back, exposing his throat and belly. The ultimate sign of submission in a canine. He was surrendering. He was acknowledging this thing as his master. I stood there, paralyzed, watching my dog, my best friend, betray everything I'd ever taught him and submit to this monster. The creature started walking toward Rex, slow and deliberate, with a lazy sort of swagger. Its every step was silent. It reached my dog, sniffed him, and then it raised its head and looked directly at me. There was no malice or aggression in its eyes. There was something far worse. An ancient, cold indifference, like we were nothing more than curious insects. It ignored Rex, who was still lying there, whining in terror. It walked around him and headed for us. Chris and Adam stumbled backward over roots. I couldn't move. I just stared. About 10 yards away from us, it stopped. Again, smoothly, effortlessly, it rose to 2 legs. And then I noticed another detail. Lying on the ground near the tent was a bright red fleece jacket, David Bailey's jacket. The creature bent down, picked it up with one clawed hand, shook it out, and pulled it on. The jacket was obviously too small, straining at the seams, but it managed to get it on. It looked grotesque, like something out of a fever dream. A giant wolf-like creature in a tight-fitting hiking jacket. It took another step toward me. I finally managed to raise a hand and feel for the camera on my chest. The little red recording light was on. And then it spoke. The voice was low and gravelly, like stones grinding together. The words were broken, spoken with a monstrous, inhuman cadence. But I understood them. Turn off the cam. It was a command, not a request. My world narrowed to 2 points. The creature's dull red eyes and the red light of my camera. All my training, all my instincts screamed at me to do what it said. Not because I was afraid it would attack, but because I suddenly understood. It didn't want to be filmed. Not because it was afraid, but because it considered it rude. An insult. Like you'd walked into someone's house and started filming the owner without permission. I don't remember my hand reaching up and pressing the button. I just remember the red light going out. The next thing I know, I'm sitting in my truck in the parking lot at the trailhead. It was getting dark. Rex was on the passenger seat, curled into a tight ball, shivering. Adam and Chris were in their own vehicle, their faces pale as ghosts. None of us remembered how we got back. That block of time, 3 hours according to my watch, is just gone from our memories. Wiped clean. In the official report, we wrote that we found the campsite and signs of a large animal, possibly a bear, but that we never found Bailey. We wrote that the search dog became disoriented, possibly due to stress or the predator's scent. We lied because the truth was impossible. We'd have been fired and sent for a psych eval. I turned in my body cam as required. I knew the last few minutes of the recording would be missing. When the tech asked why I'd turned it off, I said I must have bumped the button pushing through some brush. He shrugged. No one dug any deeper. They wrote off the section with the distorted audio as an equipment malfunction. David Bailey was never found. The search went on for another week, but turned up nothing. He was declared missing, presumed dead. His wife got the insurance money. The case was closed, but it's not closed for me. It will never be closed. I resigned 2 months after that incident. I couldn't do the job anymore. I couldn't go into the woods. Every time I saw the shadows between the trees, I thought I saw that silhouette leaning against a trunk. Every time I heard a twig snap, my heart dropped into my stomach. Rex never recovered. He wasn't that confident, proud dog anymore. He became skittish, anxious. He'd flinch at any sudden noise. He stopped playing. Sometimes he just sits and stares at nothing for hours. The vets couldn't find anything physically wrong with him. They said it was profound psychological shock. Our bond was broken. He didn't look at me like his alpha anymore. Now, all I saw in his eyes was fear and disappointment. Like I had failed him that day by forcing him to go where he knew we shouldn't. I sold my house and moved away from the forest into the city. But it doesn't help. I see it in my dreams. I see it putting on Bailey's jacket. I hear that grinding voice. Turn off the camera. What was it? I've searched everything online. Native American legends of skinwalkers, dogman stories, werewolf folklore. Nothing quite fits. It wasn't evil, it wasn't aggressive, it was just there. Like it was a part of that forest, as natural as the trees and the moss. And we were the trespassers. Sometimes I think about Bailey. What happened to him? Did it kill him? But why wear his jacket? Was it a trophy, a disguise. Or maybe it was just copying what it saw. It saw a man in a jacket, so it decided to wear a jacket too. There's one more thing. One little detail I haven't told anyone. When I came to in my truck, I put my hand in my jacket pocket, and I felt something. I pulled it out. It was a single cigarette, not from a pack. Unfiltered, hand-rolled. The tobacco inside was dark, and it didn't smell like regular tobacco, but like dry leaves and earth, exactly like the one I'd seen held in its claws. I don't smoke, and I sure as hell didn't put it in my pocket. I still have it, in a little box. Sometimes I open it and just look at this tiny, impossible object. It's the only physical proof I have that I'm not crazy. Proof that in those ancient, dark woods of the Pacific Northwest, there is something living there that we don't understand. Something that watches us. Something that sometimes steps out of the shadows. And it only asks for one thing: for us to turn off our cameras and leave it the hell alone.
Story 2. My name is Cole. Or, it was. Now I'm just a number in a report and the guy who took indefinite medical leave. I was LVMPD SWAT for nearly 10 years. I've seen some serious shit. Casino shootouts, hostage situations in sleazy motels off the strip. Tweakers so high they thought they were invincible. I thought nothing could surprise me anymore. I thought the worst things in this city happened on the surface, under the neon glow. I was wrong. The worst thing lives underground, in the dark, and it's hungry. It all started 3 weeks ago on a Tuesday. It was a typical late summer Vegas day, so hot the asphalt was getting soft. We were in the ready room shooting the shit, waiting for a call. Usually, our clients are either desperate gamblers, gangbangers, or domestic abusers who decide a shotgun is a valid tool for marital disputes. But the call that day was weird. Dispatch reported multiple patrol units requesting backup at an entrance to the storm drain system near the Flamingo Wash. It's one of the main arteries that runs under the city. Not that unusual. We do sweeps down there from time to time. There's a whole network of tunnels under Vegas, home to hundreds of homeless people, the so-called mole people. It's normally routine. You flush them out, check for warrants, hand them over to social services. Boring and smelly. But this time was different. Dispatch said people were scrambling out of the tunnels, dozens of them. They were in a full-blown panic, some barefoot in rags with wild, terrified eyes. They weren't just leaving, they were fleeing. Patrol cops were trying to detain and question them, but they were fighting back, screaming gibberish, and trying to run as far from the tunnel entrance as they could get. Our CO, Lieutenant Becker, frowned. Becker's a rock. An Iraq vet who never raises his voice, but one word from him shuts everyone up. "What are they yelling about?" he asked dispatch. A pause. Then a hesitant voice over the speaker. "Sir, they're all saying the same thing, something about a dog god." The room went quiet. Rizzo, our breacher and resident smartass, snorted. New batch of something nasty hit the streets? The dog god? I thought we'd heard 'em all. Nobody laughed. Something felt wrong. These people had lived in those tunnels for years. They knew them like the back of their hands. They weren't afraid of the dark, the rats, or the other occupants. What could possibly make them flee their home into the blistering daylight they hated? The order was simple. A 5-man team goes down. Objective, recon, assess the situation. Could be a gang war over territory, maybe a chemical spill. We needed to see if there were any injured people left inside and figure out what caused the panic. Our team, Lieutenant Becker, me, Senior Officer, Rizzo, Breacher,
Kendrick, a rookie, barely a year on the team, and Walsh, our tech specialist, handling the drone and comms. We arrived on site. The scene was surreal. Several patrol cars were parked around the massive concrete mouth of the tunnel. Cops were trying to wrestle a few hysterical homeless people into the back of their cars. One woman, skeletal and with matted gray hair, was clawing at a sergeant's sleeve, wailing, "He hears you. He hears everything. Don't go in there. He can smell your heartbeats." The sergeant gave us a tired look. "They're all like this. Mass hysteria. Someone probably passed around some bad fentanyl-laced shit. We found a couple more passed out near the entrance. Medics are on the way." We started to gear up. Weapons check, armor, turning on our body cams. I slammed a fresh mag into my M4, the familiar weight reassuring in my hands. The air was thick and hot, smelling of exhaust and baked concrete. But from the tunnel came a draft of cool air and something else. The smell of dank earth, rot, and something else. Faint and metallic, like old blood. "Comms check, everyone," Becker ordered. "Standard diamond formation. Walsh, you launch the drone once we're 50 meters in. I don't want us walking in blind. Move quiet. Kendrick, you're on my 6. Cole, you've got rear guard. Rizzo, you're on point." We nodded. This was the routine. We'd done it 100 times. We stepped out of the blinding sun and into the cool, echoing dark. Our powerful tack lights cut through the gloom, revealing concrete walls coated in slime and graffiti. The tunnel was huge, 20 feet high, big enough to drive a truck through. Filthy water trickled down the center, splashing under our boots. The sounds of the city vanished instantly, replaced by the echo of our footsteps and water dripping from the ceiling. For the first 100 yards or so, we moved down the main collector. Signs of a hasty retreat were everywhere. Abandoned shopping carts, overturned mattresses, scattered tin cans. On a makeshift table made of crates, a bowl of half-eaten stew was already growing mold. Whoever lived here left in a hell of a hurry. "Looks like they bugged out fast," Rizzo muttered over the comms. "Quiet," Becker clipped back. We turned into a narrower side tunnel. The signs of recent habitation disappeared here. Just old graffiti and a thick layer of dust. The air grew stale. The smell got stronger. I could place it now. It was the smell of a lair. A predator's den. Wet dog, spoiled meat, and something sharp, like ozone after a lightning strike. Walsh stopped. "Lieutenant, launching the drone. It's getting too tight for a good line of sight." We formed a perimeter around him, a low whirring sound, and the small quadcopter lifted off, its LEDs reflecting in the puddles on the floor. A grainy night vision image appeared on Walsh's tablet. The drone zipped ahead, its IR illuminator lighting the way. "Got nothing. Empty," Walsh reported. "Walls, trash. Wait, what is that?" We huddled around him. On the screen, the tunnel opened into a small chamber or cavern, and in the middle of it was something. A structure. "Push in closer," Becker ordered. The drone drifted forward. The image sharpened. It was an altar, a crude thing, piled together from trash, rocks, and bones. Small bones. The skulls of cats, dogs, rats, birds. All of it was held together with mud and some dark, congealed substance. And on top of this grim monument, something metallic gleamed. "Walsh, max zoom." Becker's voice was tight. The image on the tablet shimmered and magnified. My heart skipped a beat. They were police badges. Old, tarnished, some of them bent. I recognized the design from the 80s, then the 90s. There were at least a dozen of them. "Jesus Christ," Kendrick breathed. "Those are from missing officers," Becker said quietly. "I remember some of these cases. Officer Patterson, vanished in '87 while patrolling this district. They never found him. Wrote it off as him running away to Mexico with his girlfriend. And that one? Detective Moretti, 94. Disappeared investigating a string of homicides. They found his car, and that was it. A cold dread that had nothing to do with the tunnel's temperature washed over me. This wasn't a drug dispute. This was something else. Something old and vicious. "Losing signal on the drone," Walsh said. The image flickered and died. "Walls are too thick. We're on our own from here." "Copy that." Becker looked at us, his face a stone mask in the flashlight beams. "Weapons hot, safety's off, no unnecessary noise. We don't know what we're dealing with." We moved forward, this time in total silence, broken only by our own breathing and the slosh of our boots. Every sound made me jump. Our flashlights threw grotesque shadows that danced on the walls. I had the unshakable feeling we were being watched, that the darkness itself was alive and had its eyes on us. We reached the chamber with the altar. It was even worse in person. The stench was almost unbearable. The bones were old, yellowed, but at the foot of the altar were fresh offerings. A couple of rats, a pigeon, sacrifices. Rizzo knelt, shining his light on the floor. "Hey, check this out. Tracks." We moved in. On the dusty concrete were prints. They were huge. They looked like the tracks of a large dog or a wolf, but something was wrong. The toes were too long, and the claws had left deep scratches in the concrete. And next to them were other tracks. Disgustingly familiar ones. Handprints. Human handprints. But they were part of the same track as the canine paws, as if the creature moved on all fours, using dog-like legs in the back and human hands in the front. "What the hell?" Kendrick whispered, and that's when we heard it. At first it was a quiet sound from somewhere up ahead deeper in the tunnels. It sounded like clicking, like someone clicking their tongue or tapping their fingernails on stone. We froze, weapons pointed into the darkness. The sound stopped. We stood there for what felt like a full minute, holding our breath. Nothing. "Maybe just rats," Rizzo offered, his voice lacking its usual confidence. "Rats don't sound like that," Becker snapped. He held up a hand, gesturing. "Move up, slow and easy." We passed the altar and entered the next tunnel. This one was narrower and older, the walls lined with crumbling brick. The water was deeper here, up to our ankles. And there was something else. New graffiti. Not spray-painted tags. These were symbols, scratched into the brick with something sharp, and repeating phrases, written in a crooked, insane scrawl. "He hears you breathe, don't speak. He knows your voice, the dog God eats the eyes." The clicking started again. Closer this time. It was coming from around a bend in the tunnel about 100 yards ahead. Click, click, click. And a new sound joined it. A wet, slapping noise. Like something large and slick dragging itself across the concrete. Becker signaled for us to halt and press ourselves against the wall. We killed our lights, plunging ourselves into absolute impenetrable blackness. It's standard procedure if you think the enemy has night vision. But this felt different. It felt like our lights were a beacon for it. We stood in the total dark, listening. My heart was hammering so loud I was afraid it would hear it. The slapping and clicking grew closer, slow, deliberate. It wasn't hunting. It knew we were here. It was coming for us. The stench became suffocating. Wet fur, decay, and something sickly sweet, like overripe fruit. I could feel the hair on my neck standing up. A decade of training and instinct was screaming at me to run, but we were SWAT. We don't run. We move toward the threat. The slapping sound was just around the bend now, Becker slowly raised his hand, fumbling for the NVG switch on his helmet. We all did the same. The world turned a sickly, swampy green. Becker gave the signal. We switched on our lights and burst around the corner, ready to open fire. I will never forget what we saw. Not if I live to be 100. The image is burned onto the inside of my eyelids. It was standing 20 yards away in the middle of the tunnel. It was massive, the size of a grizzly bear on all fours. Its body was like that of a giant hyena, but completely hairless. Its gray, wrinkled skin covered in sores and scars. Powerful back legs ended in long black claws. But the front limbs were human. Long, skinny arms with freakishly large hands and fingers that ended in filthy, broken nails. It was leaning on those hands, and it looked monstrously, fundamentally wrong. But the head was the worst part. It was elongated like a dog's, with powerful jaws full of yellow needle-like teeth. It had no nose to speak of, just 2 black slits. And its eyes? It had no eyes. The sockets were just sealed-over flaps of skin. It was blind. The creature turned its head toward us as our lights flared on. It didn't flinch from the brightness. It just froze. Its huge bat-like ears twitched, swiveling like radar dishes. And it made the sound, the clicks. They came from its throat, some kind of echolocation. It was seeing us with sound. No one fired. We were just frozen, paralyzed by horror. My brain refused to process what my eyes were seeing. It was impossible. Things like this didn't exist. Then Kendrick broke. He made a sound. Not a scream, just a thin, terrified whimper. It was a fatal mistake. The instant the sound left his lips, the creature charged. I have never seen anything move so fast. It wasn't a run. It was a blur of motion, a gray streak kicking up filthy water as it came. It didn't roar. It made a wet, chittering, giggling sound that turned my blood to ice. "Light it up!" Becker screamed. Our world exploded into a deafening roar of gunfire. The narrow tunnel amplified the sound into a solid wall of noise. Muzzle flashes lit up the charging beast. I saw our rounds hit it, punching dark holes in its gray hide, sending sprays of almost black liquid into the air. But it didn't even slow it down. It seemed to feel no pain. Kendrick was the closest. He never even got his rifle up. The thing slammed into him, knocking him off his feet. There was a sickening, wet crunch. I saw one of its human hands wrap around Kendrick's helmet and just squeeze. The metal and plastic crumpled like tinfoil. Kendrick's scream was cut short. We were pouring fire into it at point-blank range. Rizzo emptied his shotgun into it. I could see the buckshot tearing chunks of flesh from its side, but it paid no mind. It lifted its head from Kendrick's body, its mouth dripping with blood. It made that giggling sound again, a sound full of malicious glee.
"Back! Fall back!"
Becker was yelling, trying to be heard over our own weapons. The creature lunged for Rizzo. He managed to dive aside, but it gashed his leg with one of its back claws. Rizzo screamed in pain and went down. The thing turned on him. Becker and I focused our fire on its head. It was pure instinct. Aim for the head. Several rounds hit its elongated snout. The creature shrieked, a sound like tearing metal, and recoiled, shaking its head. That bought us a few seconds. Walsh, who had been frozen in shock, snapped out of it. He scrambled to Rizzo and started dragging him backward. I laid down covering fire, still shooting at the beast. It wasn't charging anymore. It was moving differently. It dropped low to the ground and began to flank us, crawling on the wall, its freakish hands and feet finding purchase on the crumbling brick. It moved like a giant spider, its head swiveling, its ears tracking our every sound.
"It's getting around us,"
I shouted. Walsh, who had been frozen in shock, snapped out of it. He scrambled to Rizzo and started dragging him backward. I laid down covering fire, still shooting at the beast. It wasn't charging anymore. It was moving differently. It dropped low to the ground and began to flank us, crawling on the wall, its freakish hands and feet finding purchase on the crumbling brick. It moved like a giant spider, its head swiveling, its ears tracking our every sound.
"It's getting around us,"
I shouted.
"Go, now!"
We ran. Becker in the lead, Walsh dragging the injured Rizzo, and me in the rear, firing as I backpedaled. It was a nightmare. We were scrambling through knee-deep filth, tripping on debris, while behind us, on the walls and ceiling, this thing skittered along, making its horrible giggling sound. My flashlight beam would catch its silhouette, first on the left, then on the right. It was impossibly fast and agile. We burst back into the chamber with the altar. "This way to the main collector!" Becker yelled. But the creature was smarter. It didn't follow us into the chamber. It leaped from the ceiling into the tunnel ahead of us, cutting off our escape. It stood there breathing heavily, its chest heaving. Black blood dripped from its wounds onto the concrete floor. It slowly turned its blind head toward us and began to click its tongue again. We were trapped. "Mag dump, aim for the head and chest," Becker commanded. We opened up again. This time we stood our ground, turning the chamber into a shooting gallery. The creature took hit after hit. It staggered but stayed on its feet. I saw rounds spark off its skull. "Grenades!" I yelled. Becker and I ripped flashbangs from our vests. We knew it might cause a cave-in, but we were out of options. "Aim for the ears," Becker realized. It's blind. Its hearing is its greatest weapon, and its greatest weakness. We shifted our aim. I put my sights on one of its huge, bat-like ears. I squeezed the trigger. The round hit home. The creature howled, a sound of pure agony, and thrashed its head, one of its human hands reaching for its wounded ear. That's when we threw the grenades. "Get down!" We dove behind the altar. The detonation was concussive. Even through my helmet and ear pro, I felt the shockwave hit me. For a second, the world went white and silent. Then my hearing returned as a deafening ring. When I looked up, the thing was on its side. It wasn't dead, but it was convulsing, its limbs twitching spastically. Black fluid was pouring from its ears. The blasts had deafened it, destroyed its primary sense.
"Go, now!"
Becker was already on his feet. We grabbed Rizzo and sprinted past the writhing creature. As I ran by it, I glanced down. One of its human hands clenched into a fist, then relaxed. And in that moment, in my flashlight beam, I saw something on its wrist. A faint, old, faded scar. It looked like a tattoo that someone had tried to burn or scrape off. I couldn't make out the design, but the shape was familiar. We didn't have time to think. We ran. We ran without looking back. I kept expecting it to rise and come after us, but there was only silence behind us. We burst out of the tunnel and onto the surface like corks from a champagne bottle. The bright daylight was blinding. The city noise was deafening. Cops and paramedics swarmed us immediately. I fell to my knees, gasping for air, my heart trying to beat its way out of my chest. We were covered in filth, sewer water, and blood. Not just Rizzo's. I had splatters of the creature's black, oily fluid on me. Rizzo was immediately put on a stretcher, his leg torn to the bone. Becker, breathing hard, was giving a report over his radio. Walsh was sitting on the pavement, shaking, staring into space. And me, I was staring at the tunnel entrance, at the black maw we had just escaped. I felt like unseen eyes were watching me from the darkness. Kendrick never came out. The rest is a blur. We were immediately isolated. Men in suits showed up, guys who weren't from our department. FBI? Someone else? They took us, they took our weapons, our gear, and most importantly, our body cams. Our official report was written for us. We were attacked by a group of armed homeless addicts, high on a new synthetic drug that causes extreme aggression and insensitivity to pain. During the firefight and a subsequent collapse of old brickwork, Officer Kendrick was killed in action. Officer Rizzo was wounded. Case closed. We were ordered to keep our mouths shut, under threat of court-martial and charges of disclosing classified information. They put us on mandatory leave, psychological counseling. The shrink, a nice woman in her 50s, just kept nodding and talking about PTSD, about how the brain can distort reality under extreme stress. As she spoke, I looked at her and wondered if she'd believe me if I told her the truth. What would she say if I described a hairless hyena with human arms and no eyes? I tried talking to Becker. We met at a dive bar on the edge of town. He looked like he'd aged 10 years overnight. "Let it go, Cole," he said, staring into his whiskey. "That's an order." "But Kendrick," I started. "And those badges." "Becker, that thing has been living down there for years. It's been killing cops for decades. And what do you propose we do?" He looked at me with tired eyes. "Go to the press? Tell the world there's a monster in the sewers under Vegas? They'll lock us in a padded room for the rest of our lives? And that thing, you think they'll go hunt it? No. They'll just pour concrete down that whole sector, bury the whole damn thing and pretend it never happened. It's not our problem anymore. We survived. That's all that matters." He was right, of course, but I couldn't forget. I started digging on my own. At night, when I couldn't sleep, I'd be online, searching old archives, police reports. I looked up the missing officers whose badges we saw on the altar. Patterson, 87, Moretti, 94, a dozen others. All vanished without a trace. No bodies, no witnesses. All were last seen in districts adjacent to the storm drain system. All cases long since gone cold. And I found something else. Old newspaper clippings from the 70s. Little articles about strange disappearances among the homeless population. About tunnel dwellers telling legends of the hunger in the dark. The police, of course, wrote it off as drunken ramblings. I became obsessed. I replayed every second of that raid in my head, and I kept coming back to that one moment. Running past the wounded creature, seeing the scar on its wrist, the tattoo. I couldn't make it out then, but I kept trying to remember the shape. Then, one night, at 3 a.m., it hit me like a physical blow. I shot up in bed, drenched in a cold sweat. I knew where I'd seen that shape before. Kendrick had a tattoo on his left wrist, a Celtic knot he got to honor his Irish grandfather. I'd seen it 100 times in the locker room. My mind refused to accept it. It was insane, impossible. But the thought was there, and it was gnawing at me. The dog god eats the eyes. It was blind. He knows your voice. It reacted to every sound. What if it doesn't just kill? What if it assimilates? Converts? I got on my laptop and started searching. I typed in the craziest combinations of words. Mythology, subterranean spirits, skinwalkers, soul stealers. Most of it was garbage, but then I stumbled on an old urban legends forum. There was a thread about tunnel snatchers. People from different cities across the U.S. telling similar stories about people disappearing in sewers and abandoned subway lines, and how sometimes, years later, other urban explorers would find strange feral creatures down there. And some of those creatures were found to have old scars, tattoos, or birthmarks that belonged to the missing. It was a cult. The cult of the dog god. The homeless weren't just afraid of it. Some of them worshipped it. They made it offerings. Rats, birds, maybe people sometimes. And it gave them protection? Or just left them alone? And then something went wrong. Maybe it got too hungry. Or they broke one of its rules. And it turned on its own followers. That's why they fled in terror. I don't know what to do with this information. I'm sitting in my apartment. The blinds are drawn. I bought the best security system I could afford. There's a loaded Glock under my pillow. I don't leave the house after dark. Sometimes at night I hear sounds, a scratching, outside my window or under the floorboards. I don't know if it's real or if my mind is just playing tricks on me. Maybe it's just rats in the walls. Or maybe it's not. Last night, I woke up to a faint clicking sound. It was coming from the air conditioning vent in my bedroom. I stayed awake until dawn, sitting in the corner with my gun in my hands, just staring at that vent. I know this sounds like the ravings of a madman. I'd think so too if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes. I have no proof. They took our cams. The official report is a lie. My teammates are silent, afraid of losing their jobs and their sanity. I'm writing this here because someone has to know. If I disappear, if they find me dead, don't believe the official story. Don't believe it was a suicide or an accident. And if you live in Vegas, or any city with a large network of tunnels beneath it, I'm begging you, stay the hell away from them. Don't go down there. And if you're ever walking down the street late at night and you hear a faint clicking sound coming from a storm drain beneath your feet, run, just run and don't look back, because it's blind, but it can hear. It can hear your heart beating, and it's always hungry.